So what's kind of like the big picture reason that we don't keep Christmas? Like, is it the fact that it's pagan? Because he's saying, well, it's not a problem that it's pagan. Actually, the pagans stole it from the Christians.
I think there's greater reasons why you shouldn't be keeping Christmas that don't really hinge on, well, where does the tree come from? Where does this come from? It's like, well, can I do Christmas just without that part of it? I think aside from all of that, the broader question is, how does God want to be worshiped?
What if somebody said, well, we just want to celebrate Christ's birth. We're just doing it because we love Jesus.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Magnified podcast. Appreciate you being here. Today, we're going to be talking about none other than Christmas, the holiday of the ages. And for those that don't know, we don't celebrate Christmas.
Do not observe Christmas. That's correct.
Yeah. And that's been my whole life has been like that. And man, got so many questions growing up on why don't you believe in Jesus? Don't you love him? It's like, yeah.
Right.
But this has been my reality. So it'll be kind of cool to talk about Christmas and why we don't celebrate it, what our views on it are, and even just a little bit like, how do you love Jesus without something like that? And my view would be, you might be able to love him in an even greater way without keeping something like Christmas. But hopefully we do that in a gentle and kind way towards those that do. We know there's a lot of well-meaning people out there. So what do we got for Christmas, Mitch?
Well, I was thinking about this. It's been kind of gratifying as someone who grew up not keeping Christmas. As an adult, confirmed for myself, like the reasons that I don't keep Christmas as being valid. And I feel like there's been a greater awareness here in the last, since I've been an adult.
Yeah.
A lot of the ideas that I was brought up with are a lot more mainstream about like the less than great origins of Christmas, its unfortunate tie-ins with certain pagan rituals and pagan history. And so I think it's cool that people are that those things are coming to light for more people, and that's happening. However, I've also noticed like a backlash to the backlash.
Yeah.
So there's like the mainstream backlash. If there's a backlash to Christmas that's gone more mainstream, now there's a backlash to the backlash. And so some content creators on YouTube and other social media sites have been like counteracting the Christmas is pagan things. Well, it turns out Christians were doing it before the pagans, and the pagans stole it from the Christians. And so I think it would be interesting to talk a little bit about that. I don't want to do a point by point.
Sure.
But to talk about, why, first of all, why Christmas is not something that we think Christ would want us to do, Jesus. And we talk about that in the regular video.
Short form Magnified. Yeah.
You talk about that. So we don't necessarily.
That's hilarious. Sorry, short form Magnified, but like we started Magnified at. Like this is really long form.
That's
Magnified.
true. That's a good point. Yeah. The original format, Magnified. Yeah. And then talk about some of the, the common things that people bring up that you see brought up. And as somebody who's never kept Christmas, I'll just say, although I have family members who have, I'm not going to be able to speak to it from a personal perspective of what my life was like before I kept Christmas, when I did and when I didn't. But we do have some cool content on the website that we can post in the description and the show notes of people who have gone through that journey where they realized Christmas was wrong and they stopped, and how they handled the issue of family. Because a lot of people keep Christmas and it's a time of family and it's a time of getting together. And those are definitely some difficult things to navigate when you feel called to stop doing something and everyone else in your family does it. It can definitely be alienating. Yeah. So we'll post some of that content. But this conversation, I think, will be just more about, what are the reasons not to keep it, and how do we, what should we be doing instead? Yeah,
you bring up a good point with like the backlash to the backlash, because originally, like growing up, I was, told, well, Christmas has pagan origins that you don't want to emulate because there are specific verses about not worshiping God, how the foreign nations that were surrounding Israel would worship God. And so for it to be pagan was enough. And now there's like formal apologetics on why people believe Christmas is okay. And so it's like, well, no, it's actually not pagan, and here's why. And I appreciate it though, because now I have to rethink, why do I or don't I do things? And I'm always happy for the opportunity to like relearn, and re-look into certain things. It hasn't shaken me so far. I've consumed a lot of content, like Wes Huff, who goes through like, here's why we do this on Christmas. Here's why it's okay. Here's why it's actually more Christian than it is pagan.
Yeah.
Consumed a lot of it. And some of it I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'm glad you're being thoughtful about this. None of it has shaken me into keeping Christmas.
Well, I want to get into some of those things.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say, so what's kind of like the big picture reason that we don't keep Christmas? Like, what would you say is kind of is it the fact that it's pagan? Because he's saying, well, it's not a problem that it's pagan. Actually, the pagans stole it from the Christians.
Yeah.
And we're picking on Wes Huff, but he's one of many commentators who've brought this up.
Yeah, I think the important thing to me, yes, I mean, if it has pagan origins to it, meaning people that worshipped antithetically to how God desires to be worshipped were keeping these practices, and it was used as some sort of like melting pot of ideas to kind of, change Christianity to be more palatable for people that didn't believe it. If that's true, then you don't want to do it. Right.
That would be the concept of syncretism, where you're taking one religion or another religion and you kind of smash them together.
Yes.
In this case, the argument being like, well, Christians are doing it, but they're doing it for Jesus now.
Yes.
So yes, there were, drunken bacchanalian sort of events that Romans were doing in honor of Saturn or something like that. And now the Christians are doing it for Jesus, but they're not getting drunk as much, but they're having a ham instead.
Yeah.
So that would be what you're saying.
Yeah. And personally, the evidence that I've looked at, either for or against that view, there's just an overwhelming amount of there seems to be less than ideal origins for at least many of the parts of Christmas. Yes.
Many of the customs.
And so, neither here, but really that's not the thing we're going to be talking about today, primarily.
Okay.
Because while I think, yes, if that's going on, then okay, something to avoid, something to look into, absolutely. But I think there's greater reasons why you shouldn't be keeping Christmas that don't really hinge on, well, where does the tree come from? Where does this come from? It's like, well, can I do Christmas just without that part of it? I think aside from all of that, the broader question is, how does God want to be worshiped? And, really well-meaning people do keep Christmas as intentionally an act of worship to God. Like, we want to commemorate an event in history, the coming of the Savior into the world. And that's a good motivation.
Mm-hmm.
But how did God ask to be worshiped? And throughout Scripture, I see so many examples of people choosing to worship God how it made sense to them, and God being like, I've asked you so many times to do such simple things. Please, can I get you back on track with this?
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do. When I worship God, I want to know, how does he feel love? How does he feel adoration? And are there things that I need to add to that process in order to improve upon what God has already outlined for me to do? And I don't see that. And I see Christmas as an addition that just doesn't need done. If God has a perfect plan and is perfect in and of himself, then when he says hey, this is how you pray to me, this is how you worship me, this is how you love me, that's what I want to be doing.
Okay.
I don't really feel the need to improve upon that process, even if I feel but I'm trying to do it with a good heart. And that's kind of what our shorter form video was about.
So what you're saying is that that God does specify how he wants to be worshiped, and Christmas isn't in it, therefore we shouldn't keep Christmas.
Yeah, essentially, I mean, it does boil down to that.
So in other words, what if somebody said, well, we just want to celebrate Christ's birth, but it's not, we're just doing it because we love Jesus, and it's not a part of our formal liturgical, I guess you would say,
it is
worship.
part of the liturgy. Wow, I cannot speak. It is part of the liturgical year, as they would say, at least in the Catholic tradition.
Okay. So you can't extricate it from that.
Yeah, I mean,
I have friends who are atheists that keep Christmas. That's not what we're talking about. That's just a tradition. We're talking about, you're a Christian. It's in honor of Jesus. It's a part of your worship. It's part of the calendar. It is a fundamental aspect of what makes you a Christian in your worldview. And if as a Christmas keeper, you can't extricate it from that, is what you're saying.
Yes, and if you want to say well, I'd like to extricate it. I'd like to keep it because I see good things in it that I want to do.
Right.
Then I would say, okay, then you got to kind of remove Jesus from the equation because you're not, it's and is that really something you want to be doing?
One of the arguments that I did find that was somewhat interesting or compelling, I guess you could say, in a compelling argument, was many times people will make the argument, well, it's not in the Bible, so you shouldn't keep it.
Yeah.
But the answer to that was, well, it shows Jesus, the New Testament shows Jesus observing the Feast of Dedication, the days of Hanukkah. That is a historical event that happened in the pre-intertestamental times during the Maccabean revolt and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And that was a miracle, and they kept that in Israel. And so by the time Jesus arrives on the scene, he's born a few hundred years later, I can't remember how many years, he's keeping that. Well, that wasn't part of the worship in the Old Testament, the argument goes. So just in the same way, Christmas, they wanted to honor God for this good thing that he did in the world with the Maccabees. So it's the same thing with Christmas is the argument. So I thought that was a compelling, so what say you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I don't keep Hanukkah either. So.
Oh, interesting.
You knew this about me, actually. But
well,
but it is interesting for the point of the discussion.
Being somebody that is thoughtful about what you do, I'd be curious to know if that's a whole decision on your part or just like, I've never kept it, so it's not that big a deal to me.
I don't keep it because I see Hanukkah as a national holiday for the Jewish people. They lived, it's really strange because Israel was so unique in that they were a nation led by God. They were God's special chosen people.
Of course.
They were, their government was even constructed by him, like by hand, which is a really cool thing. But also they were a nation. They had laws that just governed, how do we interact with each other? Like, nationalistic things that were not directly tied to the spiritual, but still interwoven in a really interesting way. Even Israel today, it's a very different story. But like, the nation shuts down for the Day of Atonement. Does that mean the nation is keeping the Day of Atonement?
Right.
No, not necessarily, but it's very much interwoven in a way we've not seen throughout all of history. So yes, they kept Hanukkah as a national recognition of a thing that had happened in their history.
Okay.
And they did thank God for the provision that he provided, that they believe he provided on that day.
Yeah.
So again, an intermixing of the spiritual with the national. I would say that day falls much more national because it's not in Scripture.
Yeah.
And so I don't keep it because I'm not an Israelite. I'm not a Jewish person that like lived through that period of time.
Okay.
So I'm very interested in the story. I've read the Maccabees. I find them interesting.
Yeah.
And I think relatively historically reliable as far as like getting historical information goes.
Yeah.
But I don't dictate my life and how I worship God based on that either. So yeah, I would say it's an intentional choice. I wouldn't like balk at somebody that decides to keep it or like they do feel very connected to that thing that happened in history. Okay. Like doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say it's a choice I've made.
So in the Jewish world at that time in the first century when Jesus was keeping it, it was not seen on the same plane or the same level as the religious festivals. I guess, would it be similar to like a new moon festival? Because the Old Testament, they're keeping new moons, but maybe the new moons were even...
I would say new moons are even greater than that because they were commanded by God.
That's true.
At a time in history where people knew what was expected of them to do.
Yeah.
And so later, it'd be like, I don't know, I see it kind of similar. Maybe the closest thing we'd have is like if there was something going on in America and someone asked for a day of prayer, or let's say I go to a sporting event and they say, we're going to take a moment of silence for this person that passed away. I'm not going to like in revolt start yelling during that moment of silence. I'm going to take a minute to really reflect on that person's life. And like, it's okay according to my belief, but it does have a spiritual element to it in the same way a day of prayer. Like I can pray. I won't pray the same as my neighbor does. I'm going to be praying to like within my personal relationship with God, but I don't have a problem praying for something that I really do believe in. And so in the same way, that's like a national thing tied with a very spiritual thing.
Yeah.
And I can separate the two a little bit. In the same way with Hanukkah, I would say it's less than a new moon because it was never commanded.
Right.
Even in Jesus' time, him being present on that day, that's really all we know from Scripture is that he was present during this festival that was going on in the nation. Mm-hmm. Does that necessarily mean that now I'm supposed to do exactly that thing that he did? Because there's several things I would say that he did that I don't do,
True. Yeah. And I mean, that's a good point.
In general, I'm supposed to follow the life of Christ, but it doesn't mean that every moment of my life needs to be, well, what did he do at 8 a.m.? Like I need to do what he did at 8 a.m.
I see what you're saying. So So, okay, that kind of leads me to my next question about other holidays. So you're saying Christmas is unique.
It's specifically a religious holiday.
Specifically religious thing that you can't.
Unless you want to extricate it from religion, in which case I'd say, well, I'm not going to keep that for my religion anyways then. Like we've already defeated the argument.
So like Thanksgiving, we keep Thanksgiving in America, the United States, which is a national holiday that is ostensibly to honor God. Now, there's a whole story about the pilgrims and so on and so forth.
Dubious origins in and of itself.
I have no idea. I haven't done the full deep dive research on all that stuff. I mean, I know a little bit, but basically President Lincoln is the one who instituted the one that, like the way that we think of it today is kind of in the timing and everything comes from a proclamation by President Lincoln. Well, what about that, Micah? Like we're thanking God.
Yeah.
And it's a national thing that some guy, President Lincoln, he wasn't a priest, he wasn't a minister, he was just the president of the country.
Right.
So why can't we keep that?
Yeah. Well,
Or should we keep that? Or should we not keep that?
Yeah. I mean, well, full disclosure, I keep it. If someone's conscience is like, I really don't feel like I should, again, I'm not in charge of a person's life. I can't go through every single individual person's like preference or
personal thing.
Desire,
okay,
but I would put that similarly in line with like a day of national prayer or something where I'm like, what, I am called to pray. That is something God has given me to do. He says, when you pray, not if you pray, when you pray, here's what you do. And so I'm going to pray to God always throughout all my life. If someone says, hey, can you pray for me for this? Like imagine that for a second. Like it kind of breaks down the argument in a little bit of a silly way. If you said, hey, Micah, like I'm going through this thing, could you pray for me?
Yeah.
And I'd be like,
has God commanded this?
Praying for business. Like, does God command me to do that? Well, he does command me to pray.
Okay.
And if I, care about you and care about what you're going through, then I have no problem praying for that. Yeah. In the same way, God has commanded me to be thankful. He's commanded me to be grateful.
Okay.
And to the degree that I can do that in alignment with my nation, like I don't really have a problem with that. Again, it's God first, nation second, like every time. So if God commands a thing, I will do that thing. If I am asked to do that for other people, on behalf of other people, I have no problem with that. Christmas, on the other hand, while there are principles like generosity, which is totally fine, togetherness, which is totally fine, everything else surrounding that, you know what I mean? Like I can be kind in many different ways, but Christmas is not a call to extend kindness or to be grateful or anything like that.
So that's what you mean about if you wanted to extricate it from religion, you'd have to take Jesus out of it almost.
Exactly, yeah.
Like in other words, if I wanted to have a party and the party was all my friends and family, we get together and then we're going to like donate money to charity and we're going to exchange gifts and we're going to enjoy time together. But no problems with that. Like so far so good. We're checking it off. And by the way, you have to do this for Jesus,
right?
Because I'm commanding it to you as the Pope or something,
right?
You know what I mean,
right?
That's where it's run afoul. So that's okay. That helps me understand your position, and I think I agree with that. I don't keep Christmas, but I just think it's helpful to think it through in those terms. I was thinking of an example, like let's say the nation of Italy proclaimed like a national day of thanks. That they when they defeated Mussolini or they overthrew Mussolini and they defeated fascism or something like that. And I was growing up in Italy, like, okay, it seems like, all right, I'm willing to do that.
You're
it's a good
pro
thing.
That thing.
I'm pro fascism being overthrown and Mussolini and all that and so forth. But I guess then if the Pope
not
said,
pro Mussolini, pro
anti-Mussolini, pro anti-Mussolini.
Yeah.
But then if the Pope was like, and now all of you in Italy must do it, or else, like because
to honor God who I'd be like,
and it created a Catholic event out of it. Suddenly I'd be like, well, hold on, like, all right, I want to thank God for this on my own. I'm not going to do it as some sort of liturgical part of this worship service because that's not commanded by God.
Right.
You do not, and you as the Pope, the Catholic Church, doesn't have the authority to create this.
And what's so interesting about that is most of the time when I tell people that I don't celebrate Christmas, I mean, initially people are like, really, that's interesting. They want to know more.
Yeah.
But the big question they have is, how can you honor Christ without that? Like,
interesting.
Okay. They have made it such a day that it's like, to keep it is synonymous with loving Jesus.
Yeah.
And I would say, wait, I thought you said it was just a man-made thing that like we do. And it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of this extra thing that we do to show love to him.
Yeah.
But now you're saying if I don't do it, how could I possibly love him?
Yeah,
I'm like, wait, we're kind of speaking out of both sides of our mouth with that. And so yes, I do want to, the concept of like being together with your family, the concept of giving gifts to people, the concept of spending some time in just like peace and contemplation for blessings and whatever. Like if you're doing that on Christmas, like none of those things are bad things.
Right.
But the minute you've wrapped it up, no pun intended. The minute that you've wrapped that up in like, and now I'm going to dedicate that to God, I would say, okay, is that a thing God wants dedicated to him or not? And why or why not? Because that's something I see happening all throughout Scripture, where people constantly, like I said earlier, are being like, all right, God, I want to give you this thing. And God's like, I really just have asked you for this. Like, can we, and that's something we want to get into a little bit too, I think, is like, okay, like let's say you're really convicted that Christmas is a wonderful thing, and you're like, I'm okay, like adding this to my worship.
Okay.
Why have we left other things undone? This is the question Jesus asked the Pharisees. Like do the things he's asked first, and then we can have conversations. Not that I think that's going to lead you to keeping Christmas, but then let's have conversations about what do we add to it. It'd be like if God says, do justly, love mercy, walk humbly, which he does. Mm-hmm. And you said, I'm going to spend my entire existence like caring for this ant and just following it around and like loving it, because I think that's a really good thing to do. And you're like, okay, like that's fine, but this is like that's not really the point. I want you to do justly. I want you to love mercy. I want you to walk humbly with me.
Okay.
And you're like, well, I also want to do this. It's like, even if that's not a wrong thing to do, let's focus on the things God has asked us to do explicitly. Which
would be, in this case, so what are you saying?
Well, I would say it's keeping the commands of God. And Jesus says this, if you love me, keep my commandments. And that's not like, we hear that so often and it's like, okay, well, the only way that we can, like that God knows we love him or anything is like if we just do what he tells us to, which is the weirdest relationship ever, right? Like if my parents said, well, I'm only going to love you if you obey me, like that's kind of weird.
That's not what that's saying.
But Jesus wants us to obey for us, not just for him, but for our own selves. That ant analogy was super weird, but it made sense in my head. I talk about it. I do analogies a lot. But just trying to think of something superfluous where it's like he's asked you to do certain things and we're really getting lost in the weeds and like, but I want to do this thing. It's like, fine, but let's work with what he's given us to do first.
So I think that gets back to, I guess there's kind of a base layer. There's a lot of hot air being expelled, people arguing in defense of Christmas.
Yeah. What's so wrong with giving presents? Like, okay, nothing, but we're talking about what does God want.
Yeah, and exploring the origins of certain traditions that are on Christmas. Yeah. You brought up the point, certain traditions are fine, giving gifts, whatever, getting together. One of the arguments that I've seen is that many of these traditions that have been called pagan and having pagan origins, well, we actually have examples of Christians doing them first, and that maybe pagans took it from the Christians later. Mm-hmm. So it's a 1-2 punch. So it's not just it's a subversion of what the traditional argument is that Christians Christianized pagan customs. The argument has been actually
early Christians were doing
Early Christians were already doing it, and then pagans took it.
Yeah.
However, that I think at the core of the actual argument isn't who's the more pagan, who did it first, pagans or not pagans.
Yeah.
More so, who has the authority to change the system of worship for God.
Yeah.
And here's, I guess, so let me run this.
Or add to the system of worship for God.
Yeah, so let me run this idea past you. So this is kind of how I was thinking about it. The argument is, well, Christians were doing this in whatever year, 320, 520, 120, 150, whatever. So actually it turns out the Christians were doing it first, so therefore, I guess the logical endpoint of that is like, so it's fine, because it turns out it's not pagan.
Right.
But here's my problem with that. In the New Testament letters, Paul is writing to Christians saying, you're off track.
Yeah.
What you're doing is wrong.
Right.
Paul,
are not John, Peter, literally we don't have any New Testament without New Testament Christians going
off the rails.
Base. Yeah.
Yeah. So Paul while the apostles are alive is saying, hold up, guys, don't do this. You're not doing that. And certain people have crept in unnoticed and are leading you astray. They look like Christians.
And Paul says this is going to continue to happen.
And this will continue to happen. So I guess to me, that whole argument of like, well, Christians were doing it in the 300s doesn't hold water. Today, today there are Christians doing things that are abhorrent. I'm sure. I mean, I'm not going to try and list things off, but I'm saying Christians doing it isn't the argument for whether it should be done, because the question is, who has the authority to change the system of worship?
Yep.
And I say change, but what I mean is, let's say maybe Christmas should be kept. Well, if Jesus said, and so please worship me on this day through this mechanism, blah, blah, blah. Well, all right. But that he didn't.
Right.
So if Jesus didn't do it, and the apostles in the New Testament aren't saying this is what we do, then to me, that's the ultimate sort of authority in terms of the system of worship.
Yeah.
Again, not to get into that hardcore, like deep weeds where you're like, well, did Jesus wake up at 8 a.m. or what did he eat for breakfast? It says he was a fisherman. Should I become a fisherman? Or he was a carpenter. Should I become a carpenter or a stonemason or whatever? Not at that level. But in terms of how you worship God and how he wants to be worshiped, that to me is like, it seems like the ultimate sort of, let's get down to what this is really about.
Yes. Yeah. And when he's asking for worship, he's asking, it's almost like, we brought this up in the original Magnified video, like it's almost like he's asking for your loyalty and your love, your consideration, your deference, you know? And if he's to ask for something, like, how do you get to decide like what is or isn't that? Like, doesn't he have the right to decide what is and isn't that? That's why I want to go back to Scripture, because, you know, the example we brought up in the episode was like, if, you know, you're going to propose to your girlfriend, you do a horrible job of that.
Yeah.
And it's totally off base from what she would desire or who she even is as a person.
Yeah.
What love are you showing to that person?
Right.
And similarly, if Jesus says, and the Father says, like, I desire worship, you know, I desire you to come humbly before me as your creator and like have relationship with me and love me.
Yeah.
And we say, well, I'm going to decide how I do that.
Right.
It's like, that's the wrong spirit of it. And I can understand you can have good intent, but the intent is not the thing that makes it correct.
Yeah.
And to your point about, like New Testament Christians screwed up, like why would they be the metric for like what we decide to follow?
Yeah.
We do this with like manuscript evidence all the time. Huge debate. You get like some texts of the Bible that are really, really old. It's like, wow, this was from the 2nd century. This is such a unique piece of data as to what the Bible originally said. Then you'll get like 20 copies of the entire book of John that all agree. And people say, well, what should we believe in? Like, what should we say is correct?
Yeah, which version of this manuscript should we believe?
Exactly. And they both have merit in a way, in the sense that, okay, well, throughout time, there's been consistency and like these all say the same thing from different places. That means they're all drawing from a more, you know, original source that probably said the same thing they are saying. However, this is earlier and, you know, less chances that that's been messed up or whatever. Okay, I understand that reasoning. A wrong copy is a wrong copy. It doesn't matter if it happened in the 1st century or the, you know, 17th century. If I copy it down unfaithfully, that's not correct. So in textual criticism, we would know this. We would look at an old copy and we'd say, well, it doesn't match any of the other evidence we have. So I'm not going to follow that as a true
So you're saying,
manuscript.
so what you're saying then is just because early Christians kept it and however early you want to say it, it doesn't make it right.
Yeah. And even then, like, I think Catholic leaning people are probably the ones that are going to have this argument the most because they really love the early church fathers. And I would say they even among themselves disagreed on what was right and wrong. So if we say like, well, they're an authority on Scripture, it's like, which one of them, you know? So even if we find evidence that's very early that says there were Christians doing this, it's like, there's even earlier evidence, biblical evidence that Christians were doing what they shouldn't be doing. So early doesn't mean more accurate necessarily. Really long-winded way to say exactly what you were saying.
Well, no, this is the conversation that I wanted to have because that is the bedrock principle of you know, how you try and organize your life around what you believe in your faith and how you worship God. So what I want to then contrast Christmas with is, okay, so if Christmas isn't it, what is it? And I guess that's, you know, I observe the biblical holy days. And actually, another thing that's, I guess, in my mind that is problematic about Christmas, and there's a lot of other forms of worship that people consider Christian but that aren't, is how many things that clearly Jesus did, and the New Testament, the apostles did and stuff, were swept away by early church fathers that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Proto-Catholics, you might call them or whatever.
Yeah.
Because they were too Jewish.
Yeah.
And there's like a lot of evidence for that, where they're just like, it's the Judaizers. They're wanting you to keep Passover. They're wanting you to keep whatever, the seventh day Sabbath. We're done with that. We're moving on to the new thing, which is Easter, because and we're moving on to the new thing, and it's Sunday instead of the seventh day Sabbath.
Right.
And that there is some very, very clear anti-Jewish sentiment in those decisions at that early stage.
Yeah.
And some of them Justin Martyr was keeping Easter, and that was like, he was in the 150s, right?
Yeah.
So again, early doesn't mean better. The New Testament apostles is who were holding fast to.
And we even have some manuscript evidence too from like just after the apostles' time. Like I think it was one of John's disciples, like one of the guys that followed him around, writes very specifically about Passover and unleavened bread. It's like,
interesting.
Okay, so we do have early, it's you can't just say like, well, look, they were doing it. It's like they were also doing this, and why aren't we doing that now?
It's true. Why don't we follow that guy?
Yeah. At the very least, you could say we should be doing both, which still I'd say no.
Yeah.
But why, again, are we doing one and leaving the other undone?
Well, it's just so clear too, and this isn't an Easter video, but Easter is kind of in the same vein, where it's this thing that took the place of another thing.
Yeah.
Christmas replaced. There's no December holiday. Obviously, we talked about Hanukkah, but that's not part of the liturgical calendar of God's worship service or worship system. But Christmas has replaced other, festivals. Like nobody, people are keeping Christmas. Christmas was kind of took the place of maybe the fall festivals or whatever. But
you're not saying it was a one for one.
It wasn't a one for one.
They took this and threw it out and added that. Easter's a very much more concrete example.
Easter's
of that.
a concrete example where there were, there's a series of letters between the Bishop of Rome, the Bishop of Jerusalem, where the Bishop of Rome is saying, okay, you need to get with the program there in Jerusalem. Like, we're keeping Easter, like none of this Passover business. And the letter comes back like, no, we're going to keep doing what we've always done. The 14th day of the first month.
Anti-Jewish sentiment is huge in the years following Christ's death and resurrection. I think people just got off track thinking like, oh, well, the Jewish people killed him, or like, and stopped looking at their own lives that were the sins that put Jesus on the cross, essentially, or like had led him to the cross.
Yeah, a lot of factors combining to lead to the worship system that took shape, under the Catholic, once the Catholic Church became kind of organized and dominant. Yeah. And anti-Jewish sentiment was one, but I think there's a lot of factors that became part of that whole system.
Yeah.
So, okay.
But there is something good. There is something more, I would say even more beautiful about what God has already ordained as how he wants to be worshiped in the days that he set aside.
Of course.
And I think that's what I would challenge people. I know like this can get very touchy because people feel very, like Christmas for a lot of people has been an important part of maybe even like holding fast to their faith identity in a way. Like they don't maybe go to services the rest of the year, but Christmas, they like kind of reestablish themselves like, okay, like I'm a Christian. So to attack that is like, that's the one pillar I had, and I want to be sensitive to that, but I'm not advocating toss out Christmas and like, don't do anything. I'm saying, no, there's something even more, like the thing you're seeking in Christmas with the togetherness, the family, the worship of God, the reconnection with him, that's already been given to us in the holy days that God's laid out in the Bible, which again has that like, oh, that feels a little Jewish to me, but the Bible's very clear. These are God's feast days that are beautiful and full of meaning and have all the things you want from a day like Christmas, but have them in fullness, which is, I just think, incredible. So I challenge people that are thinking, man, they're just being really harsh on what I believe. I'm actually really trying to offer something up that's, it's like you've been eating holograms and I'm trying to give you like a real meal that's good and like has sustenance to it. So I guess one thing I would say too is like, I understand, I would say.
Yeah, sorry.
Never mind. I won't say it anymore. No. One thing I think is
things Are you able to hold in your brain what you're about to say? Because I don't think I will be able to if I don't say it right now.
That's fine.
Okay. One of the sentiments that people
Please keep that whole thing in there. That's so good.
I will say one of the sentiments that people who keep Christmas often point to is how it shows the power of Christ to redeem things. So like there's a logic there where they'll say like, well, let's say it was pagan to begin with. It was Saturnalia, it was some other thing, the Sol Invictus or whatever. But then Christians changed that holiday. They got rid of the sinful aspects of it, and now they keep it for Christ. And there's this redemptive power to that.
Yeah.
What would you say about that? How would you make it? What distinction would you draw between what's happening there in that argument and what God would rather it be?
Yeah. So I think it's a good point you bring up, and I think it's a good motivation that people have when they ask that question, because the story of Christ is all about redemption. So why would we not carry that out into this and this and this and this and this? Well, the story that Jesus tells, especially like to his disciples when they go to the northern boundary of Israel, and they're at this this like temple basically to a foreign god, and he says, the gates of hell will not overcome my church.
Right.
My church is on the offensive now. We're moving out from Jerusalem to Judea to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
It's not a adopt what they're doing. It's a free the captives so that they can do it how I want it done. You know, he's taking control then. So it's not well, let's just meet them where they are and kind of like meet in the middle. There's no room for meeting in the middle with evil in Christianity. There's no room for that. It's a transformed life, and that's it. So yes, redemption is so important, but I would argue that Christmas doesn't actually redeem something bad. It embraces something bad. And that's not something I want to do.
So when you say meet them in the middle or meet them where they are, what you're saying is
to bring them where he is.
Yeah.
That's the best way I could say it.
Okay. That was going to say, because, like people, we just recorded another episode recently where we talked about how, Solomon came to God, but he was at a high place, but God still met him there. But that's an example where God was meeting him where he was, but his ultimate goal is to bring him to him, to God.
Yeah, his goal was still to tear down the high place.
Exactly.
He met him where he was because that's where Solomon was. He had to go there, but it wasn't to leave him there. It was to bring him out of that and lead him to wisdom, which would eventually lead him to build the temple, which is where God desired that people come to worship.
And I guess that gets back to why it was so important for God's people not to mix with the religions of the day, because as soon as you have back in the time period where they established the covenant back in Deuteronomy or Exodus, Deuteronomy, where Moses could clearly see, God clearly saw, like, okay, well, if you start doing these practices, then they're going to draw you away. Yeah. And you're going to say, actually, it happens when they're receiving the covenant. He says, Moses is up on the mountain, and then they create a golden calf. Yeah. And the golden calf, by the way, they're saying, well, this is what, this is Yahweh.
This is God. Yeah.
This is God.
Right.
As a modern person, a lot of times I would read that story and think that they were
worshiping a foreign God.
Exactly. No.
They're worshiping the true God in the absolute worst way they possibly could.
Yeah. They're taking something that they had learned, presumably in Egypt, of how worship looks, and they've got this, this image, this object that resembles what the God looks like, and they bow down, and it's a proxy or it's an image of that deity. Yeah. So that's what they did, and that's, to me, that's such a perfect example of how Christmas works, where you go and you say, like, all right, well, just keep doing what you're doing, whatever it is, and even if they, like, keep doing your Saturnalia thing or keep doing your current way of worshiping, but now we're just going to say you're worshiping Jesus, and then within a generation or two, nobody will remember that you used to worship this different deity. Yeah. Now you're worshiping Jesus, and it's all good. And that's not at all how God works. Yeah. God goes in and says, no, you're going to stop doing that thing. And yes, he comes to meet you at that place to communicate with you and say, like, all right, now you follow me. Yep. Don't follow that.
Yes, it's not even true redemption when you think of it that way. If I want to look at redemption, it's already packed into the story that God outlines in his Holy Day plan. But I would say, look at even my own life, right? Like, I believe that Jesus died to redeem me from sin. Okay. He did not die to redeem my sin. If I was a murderer, He didn't say, now I'm making murder good. He never said that. He says, I'm making Micah good by bringing him out of the muck and mire of
the
murder.
Of the murdery part of you. Yeah.
That's the difference between what we see with something like Christmas, where it's like, well, he's redeemed that by calling a bad thing good. No, he redeems things by making bad things turn to good. That's a big difference.
And that's the transformation, is that there's things that you leave behind.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this has been a really interesting conversation, Micah. There are some good resources that go into, we talked about the holy days just briefly.
Yeah.
And so we will post those in the show notes and in the YouTube description of some really great resources that explain how biblically there's festivals and holy days that are explained in the Old Covenant, which have new covenant meaning and have new covenant symbolism that point to Christ and point to his work in this world and the kingdom of God.
Yeah. And I want to encourage people that are listening. Like, I know what we're calling you to that's a big thing, to give up a tradition that you've held for your whole life that you believe to be a good thing.
Yeah.
If this has pricked you in any way to say, man, maybe I do need to look into this again, have some grace with yourself to know that's a process, and this might just be the first step on that process. And I understand that, and I'm not trying to like upturn a person's life and then walk out of their house with it be all disheveled.
What you're saying is, feel free to reach out, comment.
Yes.
Comment in the YouTube channel, or we can also. I think we have an email address that's open. So
yeah, we have resources available, but also like we as people are living this way of life, and like not only us who have never kept Christmas, but we have people that we know who did and are now living lives that they would view and testify of as being fuller and richer now that they've kind of turned from one thing and gone into the next. So I know that's a scary prospect for people right now, hearing this for the first time maybe, or maybe hearing it reasonably stated for the first time, hopefully, if we've done a good job here. That's a terrifying thing to say. I'm going to give up something that my family loves and keeps, I've loved and kept. I get it. It's a slow process, but let this be the first step if that's you. Yeah.
So this has been a great conversation, Mike. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for taking the time and sitting here with me to talk about this topic.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. It's always good to have the discussion, and I appreciate you guys listening too. If you're not aware, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, a lot of different platforms. We just appreciate you being here for this discussion, and feel free to comment and join the discussion as well.